Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here at the Royal Opera House, and I suspect that everyone was very tempted by this beautiful location to come to this conference, not just because of the nature of the subject. And I'm really delighted to be here in a room that was supported by Paul Hamlin, who I had the chance to work for his foundation, the Hamlin Foundation, which supports arts and education. It's in that spirit that I want to focus on future talent, because you cannot avoid the, and we mustn't ignore the creativity that the arts provide in learning. And one of the things we must all make sure happens is that education has within its framework the arts at its heart, because the arts plays such an important role in human development and developing potential and aspiration. And I certainly saw that through my work with the Hamlin Foundation and its partnership with established organizations, institutions like this one, which opened up to people from different social backgrounds, young people and older people from around the country. So that institutions like this were not exclusive and did not exclude people from different walks of life. So I was asked to speak about developing an inclusive approach to future talent. And I want to start off with a vision of where we must go. I think everyone, whether you come from business or the arts or education or other walks of life here in this room, will all agree, and whichever political party we belong to, we are all agreed in the fact that we have to be ambitious for young people, and we have to be aspirational for them, whatever their background. And now more than ever before, young people face the biggest challenges that they have faced for generations. This generation is less likely to do as well as their parents' generation. That is unprecedented, because historically, the generation after the parents' generation tend to do better. And we need to make sure that we put in place the ambition, the aspiration, and the policies and actions that will support and fulfill their aspirations, and that we maximize the talent of young people in our country. So let's look at where the challenges are. The challenges are that as a country, we have 21% less productivity than the G7 average. That, according to the CBI, 37% of employers are not confident that they can meet an immediate skills gap in the jobs market, which means that they are recruiting some 300,000 people a year from overseas. So we have a skills gap in this country, and those of you who are in HR, in the world of employment, know this all too well and tell us constantly that we have to act to address that. We also have absolutely huge issues with inequality, with poverty and deprivation that holds back young people particularly from disadvantaged backgrounds. But if we don't tackle the problems early on through tackling child poverty, through making sure parents have the opportunity to work and build a decent life for their children, then those problems get bigger and more significant in later life. In my constituency, for instance, 47%, a staggering 42% of young people, children, live in poverty. Around the country, 2.6 million children live in poverty. That's 1 in 5 children in households who are facing poverty in one of the biggest, richest countries in the world. So if we are interested in future talent, we need a government that is going to tackle the root causes of poverty. And the evidence shows, only last week, a report that came out showed that child poverty is going up, and the government's going to fail to meet its child poverty target by 2020. Now, that means that we're going in reverse. There was progress that was made in reducing poverty in the past, but that is being hampered. The government's own commission found this. So early years and child poverty and making sure that young people have the best start in life is critical if we are to ensure that their talent is harnessed and that they are supported to do well later on in life and access the world of work, having got a good education along the way. We also face massive problems with a lack of social mobility in this country. Once again, we see now that a young person today will find it much harder to reach professional jobs if they come from a less privileged background, if they come from disadvantaged backgrounds. This is a huge challenge for us because it shows that Britain remains a very unequal society. Britain remains a society where social class and networks provide a critical ladder to achievement to the top of the professions, whether it's in my profession in Parliament or in the business world or in the public sector or the legal profession or any of the other major professions in our country. We have a class divide in our country that has not got that much better, and the evidence on social mobility shows, in fact, things have got worse in recent decades. And all parties have a responsibility to make sure that we create the policies and building blocks to enable young people to thrive, to do well. Now here, it's early years intervention that makes a massive difference. I know that because in my constituency, in my borough, and all over London, we saw a transformation in education because it was to do with early intervention, early years policies to support parents and young people through short start programs, but also through investment in primary education, which then created the building blocks for children to do well in secondary education. As a result, in areas like London, you see very, very rapid improvement in educational attainment over the last decade, particularly in the recent years in secondary education. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't invest in early years education, in primary education, as well as secondary education. And we've seen gradual but exceptional improvements in other parts of the country as well. So we have some great positive stories, but also evidence to show that when we make interventions early, when businesses get involved in schools through mentoring, through work experience placements, through creating a line of sight for young people to be able to see the kinds of professions they could get into, even if their parents don't do those jobs, didn't do those jobs, they are in a better position to be able to seek those kinds of opportunities, to consider those places in which they can work in. So that kind of intervention in education is critical. My party has proposed that we should strengthen the support to parents through childcare, because what we see is 1 million women who are not in work, but they could be if the policies were set up in such a way to enable them to access work through provision of better childcare, more affordable childcare, and more hours in childcare to help them to make it worth their while to access affordable childcare and be able to get into the world of work. The minimum wage was a critical factor in supporting families who face poverty, and we believe that it's really critical to make sure that the minimum wage keeps up with the level of inflation so that it is a genuine, it allows families who face in-work poverty, which accounts for very high levels of poverty now, get the kind of support they need. Now, at the time, many employers were concerned that that will be a burden on them, but the evidence has shown that not to be the case. In terms of what else needs to happen, we need to make sure that within the school system there are there are highly qualified teachers within the education system. The current government has said teachers don't need to be qualified, and yet the evidence shows that if you have trained, qualified teachers, that makes a bigger difference to a young person's ability to do well in school than anything else. So this is a critical issue for us as a party, and we have committed to making sure that teacher training and teacher training and development will be critical to supporting those in education, as well as making sure that we provide proper independence, careers advice and guidance to young people, which is another area where there's been very little support. So employers have been told that they need to get more involved, which is of course very important and welcome, but they cannot be a substitute for independence, careers advice and guidance. The evidence shows that many young people are not getting appropriate support, and that is costing significant amounts of money in lost productivity, because young people end up taking the wrong decisions at critical points in their lives. So we need proper careers information and guidance system for young people. We need proper support in the education system so that they can get the qualifications that they need in order to be able to access the world of work. It also means more effort has to go into STEM subjects to support young people who at the moment are not making those choices, and that's where the skills gap is particularly significant. So there are major issues that need to be resolved around the education system. There are also major challenges about what we do to support young people to access employment and training. And that is why we, as a party, have committed to making sure that we create a credible, highly prestigious vocational education pathway for young people. So if you asked any parent what their child should be doing if they didn't want to go to university, or any young person what they might do if they didn't want to go to university, or they didn't have the right qualifications to get into university, most people would struggle to explain what that pathway is. Whereas if you did A-levels and you followed the academic pathway, it's much more clear-cut. And as a society, we are much more focused on the university pathway, where some 50% of the population go, but it's much more challenging to work out what the pathway is for those who seek alternative routes. This is the group that Ed Miliband calls the forgotten 50%. And a significant proportion of that group end up out of the education system altogether, or they want to follow a vocational pathway, but there isn't a prestigious, well-regarded enough system for young people to pursue. And that is why we have set out a framework for making sure that young people can do qualifications such as the Tech Baccalaureate, which is a qualification that provides a vocational pathway into apprenticeships and then higher apprenticeships, which was announced yesterday by the leader of the Labour Party, to make sure that young people can, if they choose to take a vocational pathway and earn while they are studying, have the opportunity to do so. If we don't create these pathways and only have one route, which is the university route, although that is an important one, then the danger is that you have a whole generation of young people who do not have a credible, appropriate pathway into the world of work. At the moment, we've got 870,000 young people who remain unemployed. That has to change, and the only way we're going to do that is if we create a proper vocational pathway, which does not block off the route to university should people wish to go to university, but ensures that they have those pathways that employers recognise and meets the skills shortages that employers are so concerned about. The final area that we feel we need more effort to ensure that young people can access work, can access the opportunities they need, is around making sure that those who are out of work have the flexibility to gain the training that they need. At the moment, the 16-hour rule, which requires young people and others to only have a limited amount of time to get training when they are unemployed, means that they're not always able to access the kind of training they may need. In fact, they will get penalized. And that's why we've made it clear that if we form the next Labour government, then we will get rid of that requirement so that there is the flexibility for people to get the kind of training they need quickly when they are unemployed in order to access work very quick, very fast. So what does all this amount to? Does it help us to address the big challenges facing our country and ensure that young people in the future can truly be confident that their talents will be nurtured and that we will maximize their talent for the greater good of our society and our economy? I believe that governments can only play a part in that role, first of all by creating the right framework through the educational and training frameworks, but also links with the world of work. But critically, it's up to employers and it's up to communities to play their part. And that's where you come in, as employers, to ensure that young people have work placements from an early age, work experience. The requirement to not provide work experience, having removed that, means that now young people from who are not from middle-class backgrounds are less likely to be able to access work experience opportunities than those who come from professional backgrounds. Now, that is something that the world of work can and is playing a big role in. We need to make sure that those social class differences are not reinforced. Secondly, if you look at this room, we all have social connections and relationships that we can deploy in order to support our young people. Now, programs that employers are engaged in mentoring, in training, whether it's employability training and support, whether it's giving paid internships, paid opportunities, even if they're short-term, make a massive difference to the opportunities that young people can then pursue later on and get them into the career ladder. So employers can play an even bigger role, more ambitious role in enabling young people from different backgrounds to access the world of work. And the third area is where individuals play a critical role. As mentors, I've seen that through projects I established. One of the charities I set up, which supports 19 to 25-year-olds for employability training, but also for leadership development, is focused on building social capital for those who don't have it. People from white working class backgrounds who are very talented but cannot access professions, access leading institutions, get into politics and other institutions because they don't have the confidence, they don't have the connections that confidence helps to build their confidence. So when we see the kind of effect that mentoring and support from people from the wider community, including employers, can have on enabling talented young people from working class backgrounds to reach for the stars, if you like, you can see the results in what they then go on to do. And I've seen hundreds of these young people go on to start up their own businesses, tech businesses, social businesses, charities, but also enter into politics, into local government, and many other professions as well that they wouldn't have dreamt of. So we all collectively have a responsibility to harness the talents of the next generation. Now that requires commitment and leadership from government, and I hope this time next year, if my party is in government, that we will invest in young people's futures through investing in early years education as well as secondary and tertiary education into proper vocational education, but also in making sure that the world of work and the world of employers can play a positive, active role that is not marginal but central to what happens in terms of how we enable young people to access opportunities and employment. Thank you very much.
Just got a couple of questions for you, Rushanara. Says, how can we work towards a better long-term future for the country when we have political parties that focus on discrediting their counterparts and short-term gains in time for the next general election date rather than achieving long-term goals?
Is there specific examples?
No, I think it's more about party politics. I think it's just you know, should this be a party political issue, or should this be actually, this is about all of our children? Is politics a key part of this, or actually should we be dealing with this as a whole?
Well, look, I think we should be dealing with this as a whole, and by whole I mean politics, the world of employers, and civil society, and the community as a whole. Now, if you're asking me, is politics relevant to this debate? Absolutely. Because if we want to meet the demands of the labour market and the future labour market, then you require, and this is constantly something that employers rightly complain about, you need a framework, a policy framework that harnesses talent, that provides the right kind of skills for young people to get in order to meet the gaps in the labour market now, and also be prepared and ready for the needs of the labour market in the future. So where we're talking about education and training, governments, whichever party is in power, have to play their part in ensuring that the right kind of framework is set up, the right kind of educational policies are in place and training policies are in place. If you take the work programme, and you might, some people might say, and the questioner might think that's a party political point, but it's not. The work programme, which was introduced in 2011, I think, it has led to a huge amount of public investment, your money, and the results are, in the first year, only 3% on the work programme of young people got into jobs. It's gone up to about 10%. Now that is a disgrace, and I'm not going to apologise as a politician for holding the government of the day to account for that. You as taxpayers would not forgive us if we didn't. If people don't like that, then perhaps we need to think about how those questions are asked and how the presentation happens. But the substance of it is, we are, as an opposition party, there to hold the government to account, and we would expect the same if the government of the day is a Labour government.
Okay, well, one more question on a similar sort of theme, I would say. Politics plays such a part in this space. How do we enlighten our children to understand who to vote for and how to realise ambition rather than resentment?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, it's such an important question, because everyone's aware of the constant concerns about disengagement in the political process. And yes, absolutely, politicians have a lot to answer for. The political culture in our country, I just left Prime Minister's question time, and my ears were hurting at the yah-boo nature of Prime Minister's questions. And week in, week out, the speaker tells people not to conduct themselves in that way, and very few people listen. It puts women off, it puts viewers off, and that kind of political culture is one that seems to not appreciate how the country, and particularly young people, are looking at the political classes. So how we present ourselves, how we conduct ourselves is absolutely critical. And it's not just exclusive to politics, it's relevant to business. There's a general distrust of established organizations and institutions, the business community since the financial crisis, the media community since the phone hacking scandal, and now you've got another massive scandal that is
But how do children make
coming
sense
up.
of this?
So-
How do they make
so-
sense of actually who should I vote for? Who is really going to change the education of this country?
So I think that we are not going to be able to solve the resentments and anxieties people feel about politics if we don't deal with the fundamentals, which is why those bigger questions about trust and how institutions conduct themselves, individuals conduct themselves in these sectors, including politics, is critical. I think there's a big role for education, the school system, but also in the wider community about making it something that's part of our civic duty, our responsibility to vote. And I think that when you get young people thinking and learning about the fact that in other countries, and I see that in schools in my constituency, are literally people are losing their lives because of the determination to have the right to vote, to have democracies. They can see all too well how important that it is. But I think that we have a tendency not to provide the political education, the civic education, if you like, and citizenship education that young people need in order to participate. And the evidence shows that when young people volunteer, when they are active in their communities, when they are engaged, they are more likely to vote. And I certainly found that with work that I've been doing through a charity I established through a program called My First Vote. And it shows that when young people are involved in making something happen, whether it's something within their community or more generally in a single issue campaign perhaps.
They get more engaged.
They get more engaged and they're more likely to. And when they understand how the power structures work and how they can make a difference, like all of us, we're more likely to be active and want to take part.
Okay, Rushanara, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.